The Oxford Language Dictionary defines ethos as the characteristic spirit of a culture, era, or community, as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. Good afternoon, everybody. It's your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. We are in Allegheny State Park in New York, which is connected to Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, but we're at like the far northern end. I stopped in the Zazuzza Bridge, which is like the remnants of this old railroad bridge that crosses a canyon. Really, this whole area, like the northwestern part of Pennsylvania and southwestern part of New York, is just forest. This right here is Bear Creek Springs. Sorry. And today we're going to talk about the modes of persuasion again. Last time we spoke about logos, which is Aristotle's word that he uses to describe the reasoning or the argument in itself, the actual words or message in the words. Ethos and pathos are actually spoken about a lot more often in his book Rhetoric because they're more human, so to speak. But logos gets a lot more attention nowadays because that is what separates, in Aristotle's view, mankind from animals. It's our rationality, or logos. Now, ethos, we could say ethos, the way Oxford Dictionary defines it, is the characteristic spirit of a culture or era, and that's like the ethos of the times. But the original Greek translates specifically as character. Now, there is some confusion because ethos sounds very similar to ethical, and even in Aristotle's book, the Nicomachean Ethics, he does talk a lot about like how to be a good person, and he distinguishes between intellectual virtues and moral or ethical virtues. Now, an easy way to frame ethos' position on Aristotle's rhetorical triangle is by disregarding the word ethical entirely. What it really talks about is the actual translation is character. So your trustworthiness, the trustworthiness of a speaker, appealing to their nature or credibility. This is really applicable. We trained a lot on ethos. We didn't call it that whenever we knocked on doors in our office, but we would speak about building value on yourself, the product, and the company. Now, the product is probably more of a logos activity. You're communicating what it can do, but yourself and the company is one entirely ethos. Like you're building a reputation for yourself, right? In credibility, we can invoke ethos in our conversations or writing to influence our audience, enhancing our message's impact. So that's the reason we trained on those things in door knocking, because if you can establish yourself as a credible person or a person with high ethos, how Aristotle would call it, you can influence or be more persuasive. There is a reason that Aristotle's book, Rhetoric, is considered the most influential book on the art of persuasion ever written in history. And it's because he's got a lot of good ideas in there. So, whenever I was knocking on doors, we would bring up our company's awards, such as like the J.D. Power or Forbes commercials, with musical artists to build value on the company and to build value on ourselves, or to demonstrate ethos in ourselves. We would speak with specific language, so people knew that we were talking about the product, that we were experts with the product that we were working with. And we also showed pictures of us with previous customers, social proof. Now, Aristotle, similar recommendations on how to build ethos in any communication. So this is applicable to anywhere where you might need to persuade or communicate with another human being. So most jobs. Establishing your reputation, either by proxy, by having somebody who is reputable introduce you in the door knocking industry, a neighbor. In another world, it may be like a professional recommendation. Social proof, again, being able to show pictures, having other people vouch for you. And then industry recognition, just having complete third parties recognize you. Now, ethos' etymology, or history as a word, is pretty interesting. It's Greek, and it initially meant a custom place, which evolved into words like habit, and eventually became character, which is what we recognize it as today. Ethos also forms the Greek root of the word ethikos, which does mean morality, or to show moral character. That's where some of that confusion comes from. Aristotle's views are elucidated in his book Rhetoric. Ethos must be established early. If you don't establish ethos early, then it's hard to establish it later on. Similar with trust whenever you're in door knocking or any persuasive industry. If you don't establish yourself as a credible source early, then nothing that you say, everybody's just going to disregard you, right? Now, he broadens ethos to encompass more than just moral integrity. It also encompasses skill, knowledge, and proficiency, basically being a reputable, credible figure in whatever industry you're representing. And he distinguishes 3 categories of ethos, including several key Stoic principles that we've talked about, like phronesis, which is your practical wisdom and useful skills. He also talks about arete, which is like the excellence of your work, how much of a master of your craft you are. And then eunoia, which is goodwill towards your audience. If you have good intention. That's from me, but that's what it sounds like he's talking about there to me. So basically, if you are knowledgeable, you're experienced, you're a master of your craft, and you have good intentions for your audience, that stuff's going to be conveyed in your message when you're speaking to them, and they're going to trust you more because you're demonstrating higher levels of ethos. Now, there are 3 ways that we can break ethos or demolish our credibility, might be a way that we would phrase that today. One is if you demonstrate a direct interest in the outcome. So this was always an issue when we were knocking on doors. If people felt like you were interested if you wanted the sale too bad, they would not listen to you. Simple enough, right? Number 2 is also ulterior motive. So, and then 3 is if you demonstrate a lack of expertise. So if somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer to it, and you fumble, man, you just knocked your ethos down a few points. And man, dude, these forests in New York are pretty nice. I have been blessed, or spoiled, should I say, with some particularly scenic spots. So this isn't like my necessarily favorite area, but I am enjoying this part of New York. We'll see. I think I'm going to go up to Lake Erie tomorrow, but let's continue with ethos. A common way to bolster the ethos of an argument is by appealing to authority or credibility. How well the presenter convinces an audience they are qualified to speak on the subject. Basically, that right there could be a working definition of ethos. If you can convince your audience that you're an expert on your subject, then you've demonstrated high levels of ethos. You can accomplish this by being a notable figure or demonstrating direct accomplishments. So if you could show that you've accomplished something, builds your ethos. Demonstrating mastery of jargon and terminology. If you sound like you know what you're talking about, most people just trust you. It's funny how much of this stuff applies back then when Aristotle was writing the book Rhetoric, and today. Again, my main experience is on the doors, but I'm sure anybody with any sales experience of any kind can relate with a lot of these. And then 3, social proof, being introduced by established authorities. Aristotle reminds us that having a logos appeal does strengthen an ethos appeal. So let's translate. What does that mean? So if you're selling a home security system and you convince them with facts how your system responds quicker, gets help faster, has fewer false alarms, and you can show the evidence, that's the logos appeal. But it strengthens your ethos appeal, which is like your credibility in the industry. Now, we'll talk more about the emotional side, which is the pathos, in a future episode. But knowing your product also builds your pathos. It should go without saying, though. So, and to sum up, Aristotle's Rhetoric is regarded by most rhetoricians as the most important single work on persuasion ever written. And that's a quote from Wikipedia. They were quoting some textbook in there, though. Aristotle famously defines rhetoric as the ability in any particular case to see the available means of persuasion. So Aristotle's definition of rhetoric is being able to see how you can be the most persuasive in any circumstance. Sounds like a valuable skill set, particularly in certain industries, right? During the second book of Rhetoric, he talks about mirroring. I noticed this just because we did it so frequently when we knocked on the doors. As if you're training a door knocker, you teach them that they should mirror their prospects, whoever they're speaking to while they're working, all the way down to the tiniest details. If you can put yourself into someone else's frame, they're more likely to stick with you and listen to you. Aristotle spends chapters 12 to 17 going over how you must adjust your ethos to match your audience. Mirroring. Now, outside of ethos, pathos, and logos, Aristotle also talks about delivery style and arrangement, like the way that you, almost like the formatting of your arguments and stuff to be the most persuasive. And I'm going to go over that. We're going to do the whole book of Rhetoric too, because I've been shocked at just how applicable the stuff Aristotle was writing about back then is to us today. So, what have we learned about ethos, the second mode of persuasion, and the one that Aristotle values the most? To me, it appears that ethos could be defined as what influences trustworthiness, your credibility, your reputation, social proof. A high ethos person would be somebody that is high credibility. We don't speak about much about nonverbal communication today, but it is worth mentioning. If you have trustworthy body language, it's going to improve your ethos as well. Appearance, posture, and hygiene all elevate or demolish your ethos, depending on how well you care for them. So if you take really good care of yourself, people are more likely to listen to what you have to say. That's just a fact of human nature. And finally, Aristotle goes over prospecting, and he says, here's a quote talking about the youth of the time. They are ambitious of honor, but more so of victory. He's talking about like how to appeal to the youth in the second book of Rhetoric. So, after Pathos, we will tackle the ultimate book of persuasion, Aristotle's Rhetoric, but that's really all I've got for you guys today. We are in Lower New York. Tomorrow we'll probably try to make it up to the Adirondack Mountains. I'm trying to make it all the way to Acadia National Forest by probably Monday. I generally like to be in the more popular destinations during midweek because on the weekend travel is just insane. When I was in Shenandoah National Park, even though it was midweek, it was so crowded that it was difficult to enjoy myself. But I did have an older lady that was aggressively friendly with me while I was out there. Anyways, so logos is the logical appeal of your argument, or as Aristotle says, the words in and of themselves. Your ethos is your character, credibility, your audience's perception of how well, how much they believe you know what you're talking about, and how much they feel like they can trust you. Now, pathos, which we'll go over next time, is the emotional appeal of your argument, which often can be the most motivating factor in any kind of persuasive debate or exchange or conversation. I'm going to write a little bit about Anaximenes so we can continue discussing the pre-Socratic philosophers and how they revolutionized human thought during the late Archaic Age, so that next time we speak about ancient Greek history, we'll be caught up with the development of human thought and its implications for average people. Hopefully here coming soon, now that I'm up north, I won't be traveling as far. I've been driving like 5 or 6 hours a day and then doing the content creation, and I've been very busy. Anyways, this is your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. What are you guys doing to inspire, uplift, and empower your community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part. And you can count on me to do mine daily. Until next time, I love y'all.